Ladies and gentlemen, why do we speak? Why do we feel the need to fill silence with noise, answers, or opinions? You see, we've been taught that having a voice means always using it. That silence is weakness. That speaking up is power. But what if I told you the opposite is true in the moments that matter most? Today, I want to challenge a belief of all held onto, because sometimes real strength isn't in what we say, but in what we choose not to say. Because silence is not the absence of sound, it's the presence of self-control, of awareness, of strategy. So let's begin with a simple idea. When emotions run high, our natural instinct is often to react immediately, passionately, and vocally. Whether it's anger, frustration, excitement, or hurt, emotions demand expression. They push us to speak before we think, to respond before we reflect. But in those heated moments, when our heart races and our voice trembles, silence can be the most powerful and mature response. Staying silent when emotions are high doesn't mean suppressing how you feel or pretending something doesn't matter. It means acknowledging your emotional state and choosing to pause before acting on it. It's about discipline, not denial. Emotions are valid, they're signals, not solutions. They inform us that something is wrong, something is meaningful, something is urgent, but they don't always give us the best roadmap forward. And if we let them drive the conversation, we often say things we later regret. Think about the last time you were in a heated argument. Maybe it was with a partner, a colleague, or a friend. In the middle of that exchange, were you trying to understand or just trying to win? Were you listening or waiting for your turn to speak? Emotions can cloud our judgment and narrow our perspective. When we're hurt or angry, our goal subtly shifts from solving the problem to defending our ego. That's when words become weapons. That's when we speak to hurt rather than to heal. Silence in these moments gives space. It gives space for us to breathe, to step back from the brink of saying something damaging. It allows us to let the initial emotional wave pass so we can respond with clarity rather than reaction. Neuroscience backs this up. When we're emotionally triggered, the amygdala takes over, reducing our capacity for rational thought. But when we pause, even briefly, we allow our prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for reasoning and decision-making, to regain control. Silence then becomes an act of emotional intelligence. It's not always easy. In fact, it's one of the hardest things to do. Our ego screams for vindication. Our pride begs for the last word. But those who lead well, live well, and love well know that not every battle is worth fighting, and certainly not every moment is right for speaking. Sometimes silence is how we hold on to our dignity. Sometimes it's how we show respect to someone else, even when we disagree. And sometimes it's the only way to de-escalate a situation spiraling out of control. There's also a hidden strength in silence. It unsettles those expecting an immediate reaction. It breaks patterns. If someone is yelling at you and you don't match their volume, you shift the dynamic, you remain grounded while they flail. That stillness, that control, it speaks volumes. It says, I am not ruled by chaos. I choose peace, even in the storm. This is not about being passive or avoiding conflict. There's a difference between strategic silence and emotional avoidance. The former is deliberate, the latter is fear. Strategic silence is about knowing that timing and tone matter just as much as truth. When you stay silent in an emotionally charged moment, you're not giving up your voice, you're waiting for the moment when your voice will have the most impact. In personal relationships, this kind of silence can prevent irreversible damage. Words spoken in anger may only last seconds on the tongue, but they can leave scars that last a lifetime. Choosing to pause, to reflect, to return to the conversation when cooler heads prevail is an act of love, of maturity, of commitment to the relationship rather than the argument. In leadership, silence under pressure models composure. It tells your team that emotions are acknowledged, but not allowed to hijack decision-making. It communicates that thoughtfulness is more valuable than urgency when stakes are high. And in self-growth, silence teaches us to sit with discomfort, to understand where our feelings come from, what they're trying to tell us, and how we can use them to respond, not just react. It cultivates patience, humility, and empathy. So the next time your emotions are rising, remember, silence is not weakness. It's not avoidance, it's not surrender. It's the space where wisdom can speak, where understanding can enter, and where true strength is revealed. Stay silent when emotions are high, not because you have nothing to say, but because what you say next matters more than you know. In a world that rewards quick responses and constant expression, it can feel unnatural, almost wrong, to stay silent when we don't have all the facts. We often feel pressure to wade in, to offer our opinion, to respond immediately, even if we're not fully informed. But one of the most powerful and responsible things we can do is to pause, stay silent, and seek understanding before speaking. When we speak without knowing the full story, we risk spreading misinformation, deepening misunderstandings, or making decisions based on assumptions rather than truth. Assumptions are dangerous. They're shortcuts our brains take to fill in missing pieces, but they're not always accurate. Acting on them can lead to unnecessary conflict, embarrassment, and even long-term consequences. Staying silent gives us the opportunity to gather information, ask the right questions, and arrive at clarity before we contribute. In conversations, especially heated or emotionally charged ones, it's easy to take a position quickly and defend it fiercely. But what if we're wrong? What if the story we've heard is only one side? What if the context is missing? Once we speak, we can't take our words back. Silence then becomes a way of protecting not just others, but ourselves. It becomes a form of integrity, a commitment to truth over ego. Social media, for example, has conditioned many of us to comment instantly, to share our thoughts on every issue as if silence equals ignorance or indifference. But thoughtful silence is not a lack of awareness. It's a sign of wisdom. It means we recognize the complexity of the situation and that our input should be measured, informed, and meaningful. Jumping into a conversation without understanding all sides doesn't make us brave, it makes us reckless. In personal relationships, staying silent until we know the full story can save trust. Imagine hearing something negative about a friend or partner. The impulse might be to confront them immediately, to accuse, to defend ourselves or others. But if we take a moment to stay silent, to reflect, to investigate, to listen without judgment, we allow space for the truth to surface. We avoid adding tension to an already delicate situation. We demonstrate maturity and care. Silence in these moments is also about humility. It's acknowledging that we don't always know everything, that our perspective is limited, that there may be layers to a story, hidden motives, or circumstances we can't yet see. This kind of silence doesn't make us passive, it makes us conscious. It says, I will not be part of the noise. I will wait until I can speak with accuracy and fairness. Leaders, mentors, and decision makers benefit greatly from this principle. When leading others, making snap judgments without the full picture can erode trust and morale. Employees and team members may feel unheard or misunderstood, but when a leader chooses to listen, to investigate, and to speak only after understanding all aspects of an issue, they earn respect. Their words carry more weight because they're not reactive, they're informed. There's also a practical reason to stay silent when we lack information. Speaking prematurely can commit us to a position we may later have to walk back. Whether it's making a promise we can't keep, taking a stance that proves misguided, or making accusations that later turn out to be false, premature speech can trap us. Silence, on the other hand, gives us flexibility. It allows us to observe, learn, and adapt before taking a stand. Furthermore, silence creates space for others to speak. When we're not rushing to talk, we open the door for those who might have insights we're missing. We demonstrate curiosity and respect. We become better listeners. And through listening, we often learn far more than we would through speaking. In everyday life, the discipline to stay silent until we know the full picture strengthens our relationships, our reputation, and our decision-making. It prevents the kind of harm that can't be undone with a simple apology. It helps us avoid unnecessary arguments and drama. It makes our voice more credible when we do choose to use it. So, when you find yourself tempted to jump into a situation half-informed, take a breath, stay silent, ask questions, listen, seek context. There's no shame in not knowing everything right away, but there is wisdom in waiting until you do. The world doesn't need more noise, it needs more thoughtful voices. And sometimes the most thoughtful voice is the one that waits to speak. Staying silent in the face of provocation is one of the greatest signs of self-control, emotional intelligence, and inner strength. When someone tries to provoke us, whether through criticism, mockery, or passive-aggressive behavior, the natural reaction is to defend ourselves, retaliate, or lash out. But reacting impulsively to provocation often plays right into the hands of the one trying to get a rise out of us. It gives them power over our emotions and often escalates the situation in ways that lead to regret. There is a difference between standing up for yourself and reacting out of wounded pride. When you are provoked, the goal of the other person is often not to have a constructive dialogue, but to create chaos, to push your buttons, or to distract you from what truly matters. Responding in the heat of the moment, especially with anger or sarcasm, usually adds fuel to the fire and rarely leads to resolution. But silence, that calm, intentional, grounded silence, can disarm the provoker in a way that no sharp comeback ever could. Silence is not weakness, it's restraint, it's wisdom that says, I don't need to attend every argument I'm invited to. When someone insults you and you choose not to engage, you're demonstrating that their opinion doesn't define your worth. You're showing that you won't be pulled into a petty battle. You're refusing to let someone else's behavior dictate your own. This kind of silence doesn't mean you're bottling up your feelings or letting someone walk over you. Instead, it means you're making a conscious decision to not react in a way that compromises your values or disrupts your peace. You're creating space between stimulus and response, a space where maturity can operate. That space is what separates those who are easily manipulated from those who are truly in control. One of the reasons provocation works so well is that it taps into our ego. When someone challenges us, criticizes us, or tries to embarrass us, our ego flares up and demands a response. It tells us we have to defend our pride, protect our image, and prove our strength. But real strength doesn't always need an audience. Real confidence doesn't depend on proving others wrong. Sometimes walking away in silence says more than 1,000 angry words ever could. This applies in all areas of life, at work, at home, online, and in public. In professional settings, being provoked can come in the form of passive-aggressive comments, or public criticism, or challenges to your competence. In those moments, staying silent doesn't mean surrendering. It means pausing to respond with poise rather than emotion. When you don't take the bait, you keep the upper hand. You preserve your dignity and the respect of those watching. In relationships, silence in the face of provocation can prevent deep wounds. Sometimes people say hurtful things not because they truly believe them, but because they are hurt themselves. They want a reaction to feel validated. But reacting in kind only leads to a cycle of hurt. Choosing silence gives both sides room to cool down, to reflect, and eventually to communicate more productively. Even on social media, one of the most toxic breeding grounds for provocation, silence can be a powerful stance. Not every comment deserves your attention. Not every opinion needs to be corrected. Silence in this space can be a form of digital self-care. It protects your mental health and preserves your energy for things that truly matter. Of course, silence doesn't mean doing nothing. It means choosing when and how to respond. If at all, it means you might address the issue later in private with calm and clarity, or you might decide it's not worth your time at all. Either way, your silence is an active choice, not a passive one. Staying silent in the face of provocation is also a reflection of your long-term vision. If every time someone tries to get your skin, you stop to engage, you lose time, energy, and focus. But when you stay silent, you remain aligned with your goals. You remain in control of your day, your mood, and your momentum. So the next time one tries to provoke you, remember this: their behavior is a reflection of them, not you. Your reaction is a reflection of who you are. Choose silence, not because you're weak, but because you are strong enough to rise above the noise. In that silence lies your power, your peace, and your protection. Silence is often misunderstood. In a world that prioritizes quick responses and constant communication, being silent is sometimes seen as a sign of indifference or weakness. But when it comes to listening, truly, deeply listening, silence becomes a strength. Staying silent to truly listen is not about withholding your voice. It's about opening your mind and heart to what someone else is trying to express, sometimes beyond their words. Listening is not just hearing. Hearing is passive. Listening is active. It requires attention, presence, and patience. And silence is the foundation that allows real listening to happen. When we stay silent while someone speaks, we create space for their thoughts, their feelings, and their truth. We give them room to be heard fully, without interruption, judgment, or the pressure to be brief. Too often, we listen not to understand, but to respond. We're already forming our next sentence while the other person is still speaking. We want to fix, to advise, to share our own similar story. But in doing so, we miss the core of what they're trying to communicate. Our eagerness to talk overrides our ability to truly hear. That's where silence becomes not just helpful, but necessary. It forces us to slow down, to stop focusing on what we want to say, and to focus entirely on the speaker. Think of the last time someone listened to you with full presence, without interrupting, without looking at their phone, without jumping in to solve your problem. Chances are, it felt powerful. You felt seen, understood, valued. That kind of listening can be transformative. It builds trust. It heals relationships. It deepens connections. And it only happens when we're willing to stay silent and make the conversation about the other person, not ourselves. Silence also helps us listen beyond words. Sometimes, what's being said is not what's being meant. People often struggle to articulate their emotions. They speak in fragments, in metaphors, and hesitations. When we stay silent, we give ourselves a chance to observe not just the words, but the tone, the body language, the pauses. We begin to pick up on the feelings behind the sentences. That's where empathy begins, not in offering advice, but in offering presence. In moments of conflict, silence can be especially powerful. When two people disagree, there's a tendency to talk over one another, to defend, to prove a point. But if just one person chooses to stay silent and listen, truly listen, the dynamic changes. The conversation becomes less about winning and more about understanding. Silence signals that you're willing to hear someone else's side, even if you don't agree. It creates a safe space for dialogue where both people feel respected. This doesn't mean you should never speak. It means knowing when to speak. After you've listened. after you've understood, after you've taken in the full picture. In many cases, the most impactful responses are the ones that come as after a period of thoughtful silence. That's when you're able to speak with clarity, compassion, and relevance, because you've taken the time to truly hear what was being said. In leadership, silence is a mark of wisdom. Great leaders don't dominate conversations, they guide them. They listen to their teams, they ask questions, they make people feel heard. Their silence is not absence, it's presence. It's the choice to listen first, speak second. And because of that, their words carry more weight when they finally do speak. In relationships, whether personal or professional, the habit of listening silently creates deeper bonds. It reduces misunderstandings, it shows respect, and it builds emotional safety, the kind of space where people feel free to express themselves honestly. Even in moments when someone is venting, crying, or struggling to make sense of their own thoughts, your silence can be a gift. Sometimes the best thing you can do is simply sit with them. Not fix, not analyze, just be there. Your silence tells them, I'm here, I care, you matter. And let's not forget ourselves. Staying silent to listen isn't just about others, it's about us too. When we stop talking, we create room to hear our own inner voice, our intuition, our thoughts when they're not drowned out by constant noise. Silence allows us to listen inward as well as outward. So the next time you're in a conversation, practice the power of staying silent. Hold back your impulse to speak. Lean in with your presence. Listen, not just to words, but to meaning. Let your silence show that you care enough to listen first, because in a world full of noise, those who listen deeply will always stand out. There is a quiet kind of wisdom in knowing when your words won't add value and choosing in those moments to stay silent. In conversations, meetings, arguments, or even casual discussions, we often feel a subtle pressure to contribute something, anything, just to be part of the exchange. But speaking simply to fill space doesn't make our presence more meaningful. It can, in fact, dilute the power of our voice. Silence, when chosen with intention, becomes a mark of discernment. Every time we speak, we use not just our own, but the energy of the people listening. Words carry weight, and when used carelessly, they lose their power. But when we speak only when we truly have something to say, something insightful, thoughtful, or constructive, our voice carries more influence. People begin to listen more attentively, not because we speak often, but because we speak with purpose. One of the most overlooked aspects of communication is timing. There are moments when speaking up is necessary and courageous, but there are also moments when adding another opinion, another anecdote, or another critique does nothing to move the conversation forward. In those moments, staying silent is not disengagement, it's respect. It's acknowledging that sometimes the best way to support a conversation is by not interrupting its flow. In meetings, especially, people often feel the need to say something to appear engaged or intelligent. But seasoned professionals know that listening, absorbing, and waiting for the right moment to speak is far more impactful. If what you're about to say doesn't clarify, challenge, or enhance what's already been said, maybe it's better left unsaid. Silence isn't the absence of contribution, it's the presence of consideration. In personal relationships, speaking when your words won't add value can create unnecessary tension or confusion. Imagine someone sharing their feelings with you, something vulnerable, something personal. In that moment, the instinct might be to offer advice or share a similar story. But sometimes all the other person really needs is for you to listing. Your words, however well-intentioned, might unintentionally minimize their experience or shift the focus to you. Silence in that moment becomes a gift. It says, I hear you. I'm with you. You don't need to fix this alone. There's also a danger in speaking when emotions are high and clarity is low. When we're frustrated, tired, or under pressure, we might say things we don't mean or that don't reflect our best thinking. If what we're about to say isn't helpful, kind, or constructive, then silence is the wiser path. It allows us time to reflect, to calm down, to regain perspective. Words spoken in haste often require damage control later, but silence gives us space to process before responding. Staying silent when your words won't add value also helps others grow. In leadership or mentorship roles, the urge to constantly advise or direct can be overwhelming. But real growth often happens when people are given the space to think for themselves, to make mistakes, and to find their own voice. Silence can create that space. It tells others, I trust you to find your way. It shows that we don't always have to have the answers. That sometimes the best support is simply being present. Even in moments of disagreement or debate, silence can be powerful. If what you're about to say won't shift the conversation or deepen the understanding, maybe it's time to pause. Silence can de-escalate conflict. It can make room for reflection. It can prevent words from becoming weapons. And on a personal level, staying silent when your words won't add value is a form of self-respect. It's recognizing that your voice doesn't need to be constant to be meaningful. that your worth isn't measured by the number of words you speak, but by the impact they carry. You don't need to fill every silence with sound to be heard. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. In a noisy world where everyone is trying to be louder, faster, and more opinionated, silence becomes a rare and powerful presence. It sets you apart. It shows your thinking. It shows you care enough to be intentional. So the next time you feel the urge to speak, ask yourself, will this add value? If the answer is no, embrace the silence, because in that silence you're not holding back, you're standing strong in your purpose. Silence, in many ways, is the soil in which reflection grows. In the business of modern life, filled with constant movement, noise, and digital distractions, we often overlook the importance of pausing. Yet some of our greatest growth, understanding, and healing comes not from doing more, but from stepping back, staying silent, and letting our thoughts settle. Silence gives us the gift of reflection, an internal space where clarity begins to emerge when we go through difficult experiences. Whether it's a personal failure, a painful conversation, a tough decision, or a sudden loss, the urge to move on quickly, distract ourselves, or react impulsively can be overwhelming. We might want to talk it out, vent, or immediately look for solutions. But rushing through those moments denies us the depth of understanding that only silence can bring. By staying silent, we create space for our emotions to surface and be processed fully, without judgment or interruption. Reflection in silence isn't about overthinking or getting stuck in negativity. It's about asking honest questions. Why did that moment hurt so much? What can I learn from this experience? Was there something I missed? When we allow ourselves to sit with these questions in silence, we begin to uncover patterns, insights, and truths that we might have overlooked in the rush of the moment. Silence allows our minds to breathe. It gives us a chance to step outside of the emotional whirlwind and see things with more objectivity. Emotions are powerful, but they are not always accurate indicators of truth. When we react in the heat of emotion, our actions can be impulsive or misdirected. But when we stay silent, give ourselves time to reflect, and allow the intensity to subside, we're more likely to respond with wisdom and grace. Consider how many regrettable words have been spoken in moments of emotional overwhelm. Words that hurt others, damage trust, or leave lasting scars. Now consider how many of those moments could have been softened or even avoided with a few moments of silence and reflection. Silence protects us from being ruled by the temporary. It gives time for perspective to return. In silence, we can also better hear our inner voice. Not the voice of fear or pride or comparison, but the quieter, wiser voice that knows we truly value and what matters most. That voice often gets drowned out by noise, both external and internal. But when we carve out space for silence, even just for a few minutes, we reconnect with that inner wisdom. We remember who we are beyond the roles we play and the opinions we hold. Reflection in silence is also a powerful tool for personal growth. It allows us to examine our own behavior without defensiveness. What did I do well? What could I have done differently? Did I act from fear, ego, or love? These are not easy questions, and they don't always have quick answers. But in the stillness, we begin to see more clearly. We learn. We adjust, we grow. Leaders, thinkers, and innovators throughout history have understood the value of silence and reflection. They've stepped back from the noise of the world not because they were disengaged, but because they needed space to see the bigger picture. Silence is where ideas are born, where visions take shape, and where direction becomes clear. In relationships, reflecting in silence can prevent unnecessary hurt. When a conversation turns tense or confusing, rather than reacting immediately, taking time in silence to reflect can help us come back with more understanding and empathy. It allows us to ask, what is this person really trying to say? What are they feeling? How can I respond in a way that supports connection rather than conflict? Silence is not passive, it's active preparation. It's what happens before the breakthrough, before the right words come, before the next step becomes clear. It's a sacred pause that allows the heart to speak when the mind is quiet. In a culture that often equates value with productivity and constant expression, choosing silence for reflection may feel countercultural, but those who make space for it find themselves more centered, more grounded, and more in tune with life. They act with greater intention, they speak with more purpose, and they live with deeper peace. So when life gets loud, when emotions run high, or when decisions feel heavy, choose silence, not as an escape, but as a path. Let that silence hold your thoughts, your questions, your doubts. Let it work quietly, restoring clarity where there was confusion. Because in that silence, you will not just hear the world more clearly, you will hear yourself. And that voice, the one that rises after reflection, is the voice that leads you forward with strength and purpose.